In the heart of Paris, where every street still carried the fading echo of revolution and every stone whispered the promise of a new world, a love story began. One so powerful, so consuming, that it reshaped the destiny of Europe. This is the story of a man who conquered nations and the woman who conquered him. Napoleon Bonaparte and Josephine. It began not with a clash of swords or a roar of cannons, but with ink, soft, trembling lines on paper, written by a young general whose heart was burning for a woman he could barely understand. Napoleon had risen from obscurity, a soldier of ambition in a nation starving for leadership. He saw it. Josephine. At the time, she was known as Rose Tascher de la Pagerie, a woman of rare grace, carrying the invisible scars of a life shaped by loss, survival, and the unforgiving tides of revolution. She had loved, she had lost, and she had endured. But she never imagined that destiny was leading her toward a man whose name would thunder across history. The first time Napoleon saw her, something in him shifted, like a battlefield strategy falling into perfect order. He wasn't a man overwhelmed easily, yet one glance at Josephine, and the world he knew collapsed into silence. Her voice, her smile, the softness in her eyes, it was as if she carried an entire universe within her. He wrote to her almost immediately, pouring emotion into every stroke of his pen. Josephine, even if you do not love me as I love you, I can conquer the world with the thought of your affection. Josephine, surrounded by Parisian salons, charming admirers, and the glittering life of high society, was hesitant. Her world was filled with perfume, fashion, whispered gossip, and secret alliances. Napoleon's world was fire, maps of war, military codes, and the discipline of a soldier rising toward greatness. She was older than him, a mother of two, a woman shaped by survival rather than conquest. And yet, she felt herself drawn to him. Perhaps it was the passion in his words. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his eyes. Or perhaps it was destiny, quietly arranging two lives for an impact no one yet understood. They married, bound together not just by affection, but by an unstoppable gravitational pull. Love mixed with longing, hunger mixed with hope. But the story did not settle there. For while Napoleon rode across Europe, claiming victory after victory, his letters to Josephine grew more desperate, more fevered, more consumed with longing. I count every moment, my beloved, your breath, your scent. Without them, I am incomplete. My Josephine, how can you live without me? I suffer away from you. I burn for you. But while Napoleon marched across continents, rumors swirled through Paris. Josephine was not always alone. Her charm drew people like moths to flame. Admirers whispered her name. Some claimed more. Napoleon's friends sent him warnings. General, your wife, she is the talk of the city. His heart caught fire, not the fire of a conqueror, but of a man terrified of losing the one thing he loved without limit. And yet, he could not leave her. He could not imagine a world without her. Josephine's laughter, her elegance, her softness, these were the only battles Napoleon ever feared losing. Years passed, and the general became a consul. The consul became a ruler. The ruler became an emperor. Europe trembled at his rise. Crowns bowed before him. Armies marched at his command. And by his side, crowned with trembling hands and shining eyes, stood his empress, Josephine. But even on the day she wore the crown, her heart carried a quiet fear. She knew power had lifted Napoleon above the world, and she knew that power demanded something she could not provide. A child, an heir. The weight of an entire empire rested on that one impossible hope. Josephine prayed. She hoped. She searched for remedies, for miracles, but no miracle came. Napoleon's empire grew, but his heart cracked a little. More each year, he who could defeat armies could not defeat fate. Their marriage, once a burning flame, became a battlefield of longing and disappointment. Napoleon returned from war seeking Josephine's arms, her scent, her voice. He held her tightly, whispering, "My Empress, in your embrace, the noise of the world disappears. But the truth hovered over them like a quiet storm. The empire needed a future, and Josephine could not give it. One night, Napoleon sat alone, surrounded by maps of Europe, victories marked in red, borders shaped by his ambition. But his eyes were not on the maps. They were on a small box of letters, Josephine's letters. He whispered, almost to himself, "I do not want to leave her." But France asks what my heart refuses to accept. Josephine entered the room, her steps soft, her face pale with the fear she had carried for years. She knew no words were needed. The separation that followed was not a moment. It was a wound. Both stood before the court, both trembling, both broken. Josephine spoke first, her voice steady but soaked in sorrow. "I gave my heart to this man. I stand aside only for the good of France." Napoleon closed his eyes to hold back the storm within him. When he spoke, his voice cracked, not like an emperor, but like a man undone. "Josephine, you are not my first love. You may not be my last, but you are the love that defines me." Even after their divorce, he wrote to her, sent gifts, visited her garden in secret, thought of her during every triumph and every heartbreak. And when the empire finally fell, when the great general was defeated, when his throne crumbled, when he was exiled to the lonely island of St. Helena, he carried only a few possessions. Among them, Josephine's portrait. Each night he held it, touched its edges, closed his eyes, and whispered to the silence, "My Josephine, you are the only victory I ever cherished." In his final hours, with the wind of the Atlantic whispering outside his walls, Napoleon's breaths grew shallow. A priest waited. Soldiers stood guard, but Napoleon saw none of them. His eyes were on a memory, a woman in a silk gown, smiling softly, her voice like a quiet melody, her love the only empire he ever bowed before. With his last breath, he whispered one word, "Josephine," and the world's greatest conqueror fell not to war, not to armies, but to a love he could never escape. To this day, historians debate Napoleon's strategies. They study his battles, his codes, his victories, but they forget that behind the emperor was a heart that beat, broke, burned, and surrendered to one woman, Josephine, the only battle Napoleon Bonaparte,
which he never won.